My beloved child. No one noticed the moment the atmosphere changed, because the loudest turning points rarely arrive with loud voices. They arrive through a whisper, through a sentence spoken so softly that only the hearts meant to hear it begin to tremble. Yesterday became one of those moments. While everyone believed they were watching an ordinary conversation unfold, something far more meaningful was taking shape beneath the silence. A single person stood nearby, smiling on the outside while quietly searching for reassurance. They expected familiar words. They expected certainty. Instead, they heard a gentle confession that changed the meaning of everything. "You're my real future." The words were never shouted. They didn't need to be. Their quietness carried a truth that echoed far beyond that room. Don't skip, because this story is not about winning or losing someone's affection. It is about the extraordinary moment when hidden feelings finally become impossible to hide. There are seasons when people continue walking paths that no longer feel like home simply because they are afraid to admit what their heart has already decided. You may have lived through moments like that yourself. Perhaps you've smiled while carrying questions no one else could see. Perhaps you've wondered why certain connections keep returning to your thoughts no matter how much time passes. That is why this moment matters. Those whispered words were not born in a single evening. They were formed through countless quiet realizations, unnoticed glances, and conversations that ended with emotions left unsaid. Every step had been leading toward this one sentence, even if no one realized it at the time. The unexpected part was not the confession itself. It was the silence that followed. Sometimes silence reveals more than 100 explanations ever could. The person standing nearby suddenly understood that they were listening to something they could never replace with effort alone. Tears appeared, not because anyone had been cruel, but because reality had finally spoken with complete honesty. Some truths arrive gently, yet they still transform everything they touch. Stay till the end, because something important is waiting for you, and the next moment will reveal why those few whispered words were only the beginning of a much deeper story. The next chapter did not begin with another conversation. It began with an unexpected stillness that settled over everyone who had been present, as though time itself wanted every heart to reflect before another word was spoken. Some moments refused to be rushed, and this was one of them. The person who had whispered those unforgettable words did not immediately explain them. There was no dramatic speech, no desperate attempt to justify what had just happened. Instead, they simply looked ahead with a calm expression that revealed something new: certainty. That quiet confidence carried more weight than any promise ever could. Don't skip, because what happened in the following minutes uncovered feelings that had been hidden for far longer than anyone imagined. The one who had been standing as the third party slowly realized that hope built only on assumptions can disappear in a single honest moment. Tears continued to fall, not because someone had taken happiness away, but because they finally understood they could not compete with a bond that had been growing in silence long before they ever entered the story. For the first time, they stopped asking, "Why did this happen?" and quietly wondered, "When did this begin?" It was the question no one else had thought to ask. The answer stretched back through forgotten conversations, meaningful smiles that lasted a second too long, and moments when two hearts understood each other without speaking at all. Meanwhile, the person who had whispered, "You're my real future," carried a different emotion altogether. Relief. The kind of relief that comes only after hiding the truth for far too long. They had reached a place where pretending felt heavier than honesty. Every step away from silence felt like freedom, even though they knew difficult conversations still waited ahead. Something inside them had changed forever. They were no longer afraid of where their heart wanted to go. Yet the story was far from complete. As everyone slowly began leaving that place, one unexpected detail remained unnoticed by almost everyone. Resting quietly where they had been standing was something small, something deeply personal, left behind without intention. At first glance it seemed ordinary, almost forgettable. But the person who discovered it froze the instant they recognized what it meant. Stay till the end, because that single forgotten item was about to reveal a truth that none of them had prepared themselves to face, and everything you believe about yesterday's whisper is about to become even more meaningful. Not every discovery announces itself the moment it is found. Sometimes the smallest detail waits quietly, almost patiently, until the right person is ready to understand it. The item left behind seemed ordinary enough that most people would have walked past without a second glance. But the one who picked it up recognized it immediately. Their breathing slowed. Their eyes softened. It was not valuable because of what it was valuable because of what it represented. Don't skip. Because this is where the story begins, revealing what had been hidden in plain sight all along. As they held it in their hands, memories started returning one after another. They remembered a conversation that had seemed insignificant months earlier. They remembered a promise that had never been spoken aloud but had somehow been kept anyway. They remembered the quiet habit of looking back one extra time before walking away, as if hoping someone would still be there. Suddenly, scattered moments that once felt unrelated began fitting together like pieces of a picture that had been waiting to be completed. Nothing about this connection had been accidental. Every meeting, every pause, every unfinished sentence had quietly shaped what happened yesterday. Far away, the person who had whispered, "You're my real future," was experiencing the same flood of memories. They smiled. For the first time, they looked inward instead. Through tears that were beginning to settle into acceptance, they realized something unexpected: real affection cannot be built by convincing someone. It grows naturally where honesty is welcomed and where hearts feel understood. That realization did not erase the sadness overnight, but it gently replaced confusion with clarity. Just when it seemed the evening had finally reached its conclusion, a phone resting silently on a nearby table lit up with a single new message. No ringtone. No interruption. Only a few carefully chosen words appearing on the screen. The person who saw them stood completely still, because those words connected directly to the whisper from yesterday in a way no one could have predicted. Stay till the end. Because the message had not been sent by chance, and its final sentence was about to change the direction of this entire journey. Without warning, the room felt smaller, not because anyone had entered, but because a single message carried the weight of everything that had been left unsaid. The screen remained illuminated for only a few seconds, yet those few seconds seemed to stretch into an eternity. The words were simple. They did not demand attention. They did not explain the past. They simply read, "I can't keep pretending anymore." In that quiet sentence, every unanswered question from yesterday began finding its place. Stay till the end, because the meaning behind those words reached far deeper than anyone expected. The person holding the phone didn't answer immediately. Instead, they closed their eyes for a brief moment, remembering every time honesty had almost appeared but disappeared behind hesitation. They realized that truth has its own timing. It cannot be forced, yet it refuses to stay hidden forever. Yesterday's whisper had opened the door, but this message was the first step through it. Meanwhile, the one who had quietly said, "You're my real future," was no longer searching for the perfect explanation. They understood that genuine feelings are not proven through dramatic gestures. They are revealed through consistency. The small choices made over time, the conversations that continue even when life becomes complicated, the quiet desire to protect someone's peace instead of simply chasing their attention. That realization brought an unexpected calm. For the first time in a long while, they no longer felt divided between what they truly felt and what they believed others expected. Elsewhere, the third party wiped away the last of their tears and looked back at the evening with new eyes. They could now see moments they had overlooked, the subtle smiles, the effortless understanding, the quiet comfort that existed between two people long before any confession was spoken. It wasn't a sudden change of heart that had shaped yesterday. It was the final chapter of a story that had been unfolding quietly for much longer than anyone realized. Then came the detail that no one had noticed before. Hidden beneath the message was a draft that had never been sent. It had been written days earlier, then saved, rewritten, saved again, as though its author had been gathering courage one sentence at a time. The first line was enough to stop every thought in its tracks. "If I tell you the truth, everything between us may finally become real." Don't skip, because the next moment isn't about another confession. It's about discovering why that message remained unsent for so long, and who quietly encouraged the courage to write it in the first place. Long before anyone realized the story was changing, courage had already begun growing in silence. It rarely arrives all at once. It appears through small decisions that seem almost invisible at first: a sentence rewritten, a message saved instead of deleted, a heartbeat that refuses to ignore what it already knows. That unsent draft was proof of exactly that. Every version of it carried the same feeling, even though the words kept changing. The heart behind it had never changed at all. Don't skip, because the reason it remained unfinished is more meaningful than you might imagine. Reading further, it became clear that the writer had never been searching for perfect words. They had been searching for the perfect moment. They wanted honesty to arrive without creating confusion. They wanted their feelings to bring peace rather than uncertainty. Line after line revealed someone who had quietly chosen patience over impulse, believing that if a connection was genuine, it would not disappear simply because it needed time to unfold. That quiet wisdom had gone unnoticed by almost everyone around them. Then another memory surfaced. It was a conversation from weeks before, brief enough that most people would have forgotten it. Someone had smiled and gently said, "One day you'll stop hiding what your heart already knows." At the time, those words sounded like casual encouragement. Now they felt completely different. They had become the turning point. The writer hadn't found courage alone. Someone had believed in them long before they believed in themselves, and that quiet encouragement had stayed alive inside them until yesterday's whisper finally gave it a voice. At the same time, another realization began unfolding. The person who heard, "You're my real future," had sensed this change long before the confession ever happened. There had been moments when they noticed longer pauses, warmer smiles, and conversations that lingered even after there was nothing left to say. They never demanded answers. They simply allowed trust to grow naturally. Looking back now, they understood that every ordinary moment had quietly been preparing them for this extraordinary one. Just as both hearts seemed ready to leave uncertainty behind, something unexpected happened. A close friend stepped forward with a gentle smile and reached into their pocket. "I think this belongs to you," they said, holding out a small folded note that no one realized had slipped away days earlier. The person receiving it hesitated before opening it, because they instantly recognized the handwriting. "Stay till the end," because the words written inside that forgotten note had never been spoken aloud, and they would reveal that yesterday's whisper was only the beginning of a promise that had been waiting to be discovered. Some promises do not begin the day they are spoken. They begin the first time someone quietly chooses the same person again, without anyone noticing. That forgotten note carried exactly that feeling. Its edges were slightly folded, as though it had been opened, closed, and held countless times before finally finding its way back. The moment those familiar words appeared on the page, everything else faded into the background. "Don't skip," because this quiet message revealed a truth that no conversation had been able to express. The note did not contain grand declarations. It simply said, "No matter how long this journey takes, I never want to lose the peace I feel when you're near." For a few seconds, nothing moved. Those simple words carried more meaning than anyone expected. They had been written before yesterday's whisper, before the tears, before the silence that followed. In other words, the heart had already chosen its direction long before anyone else understood the story. As that realization settled in, another memory gently returned. There had been countless opportunities to walk away. Life had presented easier paths, simpler conversations, and moments where letting go would have seemed reasonable. Yet every time distance appeared, something quiet drew them back together, not through force, not through obligation, but through a sense of comfort that never disappeared. The connection had never depended on dramatic moments. It had been strengthened by ordinary ones. By shared laughter, patient understanding, and the quiet confidence that grew whenever they were simply themselves. The third party, watching everything from a respectful distance, finally understood what had felt impossible to accept only a day before. Their tears had softened into reflection. They realized that genuine affection cannot be measured by who arrives first or who tries the hardest. It grows where two hearts naturally recognize one another, often long before either of them has the courage to say it aloud. That understanding brought a quiet peace that had been missing since yesterday. Just when it seemed every hidden feeling had finally come into the light, the person who had whispered, "You're my real future," unfolded the note one last time. Tucked behind it was another tiny piece of paper that no one had noticed. It wasn't part of the original message. It had been added later, almost as an afterthought. On it were only 6 handwritten words. "Tomorrow. I'll finally tell you everything." No date. No explanation. Just a promise waiting to be fulfilled. Stay till the end, because when tomorrow arrives, the truth will not simply answer old questions, it will uncover the quiet reason why every step of this journey had been leading to the same unforgettable moment. Morning arrived quietly, carrying none of the urgency that everyone had imagined. The world continued as usual, yet for one heart, every passing minute felt different. A promise had been made, and promises have a remarkable way of changing the atmosphere long before they are fulfilled. The 6 handwritten words echoed again and again, "Tomorrow. I'll finally tell you everything." They were no longer just ink on paper. They had become a doorway waiting to be opened. Stay till the end. Because the truth that was about to be shared was not loud, but it would remain unforgettable. When they finally met, there was no audience, no dramatic setting, and no perfect speech prepared in advance. They simply stood together for a moment, allowing silence to speak first. Sometimes the strongest connections don't rush to fill every pause. They trust the quiet. Then, with a gentle smile, the one who had carried those hidden feelings took a slow breath and said, "The future I spoke about yesterday didn't begin yesterday. It began the first day you made me feel completely understood." Those words settled gently between them. Suddenly, so many ordinary memories became extraordinary. The conversations that lasted longer than necessary. The times one message brought peace after a difficult day. The way neither of them ever had to pretend to be someone else. None of those moments had seemed life-changing on their own, yet together they had quietly built something neither of them fully recognized until now. Don't skip, because the next realization is the one that changed every remaining doubt. The person listening smiled with tears of relief, not because they were surprised, but because they finally heard what their heart had sensed for so long. They realized that genuine affection doesn't suddenly appear. It reveals itself little by little, until one day the truth becomes impossible to hide. Yesterday's whisper had not created the future. It had simply uncovered the future that had already been growing in silence. A few steps away, the third party happened to see them sharing that peaceful conversation. This time, there was no sadness in their expression. Instead, there was acceptance, and even a quiet smile. They understood something that many people spend years searching for: the right connection never needs to diminish someone else in order to become meaningful. Every person's journey has its own season, and this season belonged to two hearts that had finally chosen honesty over hesitation. Just as they prepared to walk forward together, one final surprise appeared. A mutual friend approached with an old photograph that had been forgotten inside a book for months. Looking at it, they all laughed softly, because it captured a moment none of them had considered important at the time. Yet in that single picture, one detail stood out above everything else. Long before any whisper, long before any confession, their eyes had already been searching for each other. Something important is waiting for you. Because that forgotten photograph holds one final detail that neither of them has noticed yet, and it may reveal that this story began much earlier than anyone has ever imagined. There are memories that seem ordinary until time quietly gives them a new meaning. The photograph rested gently between their hands, its colors softened by the passing months, yet one tiny detail remained perfectly clear. It wasn't where they were standing. It wasn't who else appeared in the frame. It was the unmistakable way they were looking toward one another without even realizing it. Some connections begin long before words ever dare to follow. Don't skip, because this forgotten moment uncovered something neither of them had ever noticed before. They studied the picture in silence. At first, they smiled at the familiar place and the familiar faces. Then their expressions slowly changed. The photograph had captured a fraction of a second that no one remembered. While everyone else was focused somewhere else, the two of them had instinctively turned toward each other at the exact same moment. There was no reason to do it. No one had called their names. Yet somehow, their attention met naturally, as though their hearts already understood a language their minds had not learned yet. A quiet warmth settled over them. Suddenly, yesterday's whisper no longer felt unexpected. It felt inevitable. Every chapter that had once seemed disconnected now flowed together with remarkable clarity. The missed opportunities, the unfinished conversations, the moments when life gently pulled them apart only to bring them together again, they were no longer random events. They were simply pieces of the same story waiting for the right time to be understood. The one who had whispered, "You're my real future," looked at the photograph once more and smiled with complete peace. "I spent so much time wondering when these feelings began," they said softly. "Now I realize they were quietly growing while I was busy looking for the exact moment." The realization brought neither excitement nor fear. It brought gratitude. There was something comforting about knowing that the strongest bonds often grow without demanding attention. Even the third party, hearing those words from a respectful distance, felt a quiet sense of closure. They understood that no single conversation had changed everything. Yesterday's tears had simply marked the moment when hidden truths finally stepped into the light. Sometimes the greatest gift is not getting the answer we expected, it is finding the clarity we needed to continue our own journey with hope. Just as everyone believed there was nothing left to discover, the mutual friend gently turned the photograph over. On the back, written in faded handwriting that had almost disappeared with time, was a short sentence no one remembered writing. "One day, you'll understand why this moment mattered." No signature. No date. Only those simple words, patiently waiting to be read. Stay till the end, because the next chapter will reveal who wrote that mysterious message, and why they seemed to recognize this beautiful story long before anyone else did. The answer did not arrive through excitement. It arrived through recognition. As the faded handwriting was studied more carefully, one memory quietly rose above all the others. Someone had written those words during a joyful gathering years ago, not as a prediction, but as a reminder that certain moments become meaningful only after life has had enough time to reveal their purpose. Suddenly, the mystery felt less like a puzzle and more like a gift that had patiently waited to be understood. Stay till the end. Because the final piece of this journey was never hidden from you, it was simply waiting for the right season. A gentle laugh broke the silence as the mutual friend finally remembered. "I wrote that," they admitted with a warm smile. "Everyone was taking pictures that day, but the two of you kept finding each other without even trying. I thought it was beautiful, so I wrote those words on the back before putting it away." No one had noticed. No one had asked. The photograph had quietly rested in a forgotten book, carrying its little secret through the years until this very moment. The two hearts looked at each other with a new sense of wonder. They realized that the story they had spent so much time trying to understand had never depended on one whisper, one message, or one unforgettable evening. Those moments simply revealed what had been growing all along. Real affection had shown itself through patience, through kindness, through choosing to listen instead of assuming, and through finding peace in each other's presence again and again. The one who had whispered, "You're my real future," took a slow breath and smiled with complete honesty. "I used to think I was waiting for the perfect moment," they said softly. "Now I know the perfect moment wasn't something I had to find. It was something we were quietly creating every time we chose sincerity over fear, patience over hurry, and understanding over confusion." Nearby, the third party watched the conversation one final time. There was no bitterness left, only quiet respect. They understood that every person deserves a connection where feelings flow naturally, without being forced or compared. Instead of looking back with regret, they turned toward their own path with a lighter heart, carrying the belief that meaningful chapters can begin in unexpected places. As the sun began to set, the photograph was carefully placed back into its envelope, not to hide it away again, but to preserve the reminder it carried. Some stories are remembered because of dramatic moments. Others are remembered because they teach us that the strongest bonds often grow in ordinary days, unnoticed until one simple sentence changes everything. And somewhere deep within that peaceful silence, yesterday's whisper still echoed, not as a promise of what might happen, but as a quiet reflection of what had already become true. Something important was never waiting at the end of this story. It had been growing with every page.